Have you ever heard the saying that another person's trash can be another person's treasure? In 2012, I remember being homesick with the flu, and after seeing this rad commercial for Final Fantasy XIII 2, I picked up the first game at Walmart a few days prior to getting sick. I remember not having too much time to play this actually before I got sick, so this was the perfect opportunity to dive in. I was coughing my lungs out while this game brought me so much relaxation and recovery. On my first playthrough of Final Fantasy XIII, it was filled with smiles, tears, and it reminded me of a simpler time in gaming. When I finished the game, I went online to see if people talked about this game at all, and I was astounded by the wave of negativity surrounding it. Final Fantasy XIII is by no means a perfect game. In fact, out of the trilogy, it's not even my favorite. However, I felt and will always feel at worst, it's just a solid JRPG game. This year I wanted to revisit it, and when it was on sale on Steam, I felt it was a great time to buy it again for $5. And this playthrough has really solidified a few things for me. So everybody, we're going to be going into a new direction for this kind of video and break it down into different sections on certain elements of the game. I just want you guys to know that I love Final Fantasy XIII even for all of its flaws. So let's get right into it. Combat in Final Fantasy XIII is like eating a Taco Bell taco. It's filled with some really great bits that sometimes feel like they're held back by some interesting design choice. Well, that's an analogy. Anyway, the early game takes just a bit to amp up, and you're often just going to be using the auto battle. This is where the game gets the game playing itself meme, and I don't think that's really entirely fair to it. The further you progress, the more you can see how much strategy is involved in the battle system. There are 6 different paradigms: Commando, Ravager, Sentinel, Medic, and Saboteur, as well as Synergist. Your job as the player is to figure out which optimization works best for you for each encounter. Basically, the combat consists of 3 things. You need to keep your party buffed up, as well as keep the enemy debuffed. The other goal you have is you need to stagger the enemy in order to basically down it. This is very true for bosses as well. If you're not doing enough damage, the game heavily punishes you for it. There's also a great degree of strategy of knowing when to play super offensively and playing super defensively. I really like that about 13. It kind of punishes you if you don't make the right decision, if you switch to the wrong paradigm at the wrong time. The bit I dislike about 13 is for the first half of the game, you're gated to 2 characters and the classes are very limited. The later point in the game where you can customize your party and paradigms is incredible, but it takes about like 15 hours to get to this point. 13.2 does this so much better, giving you everything at the start. I made a separate video about this, but a port of 13 could benefit in the early game, with giving you the option to 1. Switch leaders, and 2. Unlock paradigm abilities earlier. I really dislike if your leader dies, you get a game over. The sequel made this so much better with a simple fix, that if this game ever got ported again could make it so much better. The combat feels very fast and fluid. When you stagger an enemy, it feels so damn satisfying bursting them down with a double Commando Ravager combo. That's where this game is so fun for me, coming up with these weird paradigm combos. In the later half of the game, you will often find yourself switching party members for certain encounters. I rocked a Lightning, Saz, and Fang party for most of the late game, until I got sweaty and ended up looking up the most optimized party. Overall, while 13's combat starts off slow and can take a while to amp up, if you can get past that early stage, you're left with a fast-paced, fun, engaging combat system that rewards good optimization. When people talk about Final Fantasy XIII, the number one thing people think of is the linearity in the game, and this is something that's very tough for me to defend. While I do think the linearity makes sense for the story at the beginning of the game, gameplay-wise it can leave a lot to be desired at the start. Now, if you're able to put in the time, the later half of the game is incredibly fun gameplay-wise, and I know this has kind of been the broken record of this video, but 13.2 really takes to heart the criticisms that people had with this game and made it a much less linear experience than Final Fantasy XIII. The first half of the game can be absolutely incredible if you are into the story though. The characters of Final Fantasy XIII are absolutely among some of my favorites in gaming. Yeah, next to Sonic the Hedgehog, Jill Valentine, Thrall, I mean, man, I really like some weird characters. Anyway, the cast in this game is awesome. each character undergoes an arc and journey that pays off in the later segments of the game. This makes the ending all the more emotional once you reach that. The whole story of Final Fantasy XIII is a mouthful to answer, to say the least. A lot of terms are thrown at you: fal'Cie, l'Cie, pulse, cocoon, and it can be a bit tricky to follow at times, and this is even from somebody who's actually completed the trilogy before. There are 6 main characters in the universe that you play as: Lightning, Sazh, Vanille, Fang, Snow, and Hope. I would also consider Sarah a main character, as you see her in many flashback cutscenes, and she's the damsel in distress character in this game. Lightning, the soldier looking to save her sister. Sazh, the father looking to save his son. Snow, the hero that'll do anything to save his allies and will stop at nothing to save his fiancée. Hope, the child who, spoiler, loses his mother at the start of the journey and has an arc regarding this. Vanille and Fang, the protectors, who you uncover more about their past throughout the game. When you get into it, the whole story's main theme is about defying fate, doing the impossible, overcoming yourself and your fear of giving up. I always liked how each character in this game undergoes a personal journey from start to finish, and you get so much payoff at the end of the game. There are so many moments in this game that the game knows are memorable and throws at you later on in the game to hit you in the feels. There's also plenty of visual storytelling as well. For example, near the end of the game you go to a town called Araba. This is where Vanille and Fang used to live. You are most likely fighting their old villagers turned to Seath, and I think that is very dark and also a nice touch by the writers and the developers. A lot of retrospectives will recap the story for you. I don't think I'm the person to do that, but if you're looking for an incredibly fun story with likable characters, 13 is the game for you. Overall, Final Fantasy XIII is an extremely cinematic experience. Each cutscene feels like a well-directed dramatic anime, and I love this. The quality matches some of my favorite games of the modern era, and is consistent throughout the whole game. Even the in-game cutscenes and the engine look phenomenal. The team that worked on this did a ton of great visual storytelling, and I think they're to be commended on that. If you're a fan of anime, I believe you will find something great here. It takes a bit to get into the story, and sometimes even a bit of research, but Final Fantasy XIII has a great start and great payoff at the end for those willing to take the 40 to 60 hour journey. Visually, this game was way ahead of its time. It's on par with a lot of games I play on my PS5 and PC. The whole game feels like an art showcase, and I can't fathom how many hours that the developers had to spend optimizing the engine that this was produced on in order to make it run on an Xbox 360 and PS3. Playing this on my PC, it ran smooth as butter, with a few hiccups only while recording, and I think that's just a problem with my computer rather than the port of this game. The last thing I'd like to talk about is the soundtrack in this game. The soundtrack is one of the most beautiful video game soundtracks I've heard in any game, and it only keeps getting better with the sequel. If you have no interest in playing Final Fantasy XIII, at the very least, I encourage you to go on YouTube and just listen to the soundtrack. In my opinion, the soundtrack actually warrants a playthrough in itself. It is so beautiful when you're going down the different levels and the different areas with these just beautiful orchestrated tracks playing in your ear. Final Fantasy XIII has had a rocky reception from the Final Fantasy fanbase. However, in recent years, I've noticed more people have come around to it. I've seen YouTubers scream and yell about how much they hate this game, and while they are certainly entitled to their opinion, I feel this game at its worst is a linear, solid JRPG with a great story, great presentation, fun combat system, and is something overall that's very pretty to look at. You could pick this game up for $15 on Steam and even cheaper on sale, and I think at that price this game is absolutely a steal. If I learned anything from playing the Final Fantasy XIII trilogy overall, it's to sometimes just formulate your own opinion. If you think something looks interesting that's getting ragged on, try it out, see what you think, because you know the saying, guys, another person's trash may become your treasure. My name is Box, and I will see y'all next time.